whether we have ramps or some of the basic kind of things we all know from Rick Hansen's work of 20 years. This is a bit beyond and more expanded to that. And so whether it drives to some policies, I don't think it can be determined at this till we actually do the work that the government has outlined that you need to have as your background, and then tick the boxes there, and then we can see if it drives policy somewhere.
May I speak to that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, Mr. Prunkle and Ms. Gunn went to a session in the spring to upgrade their own understanding of the expectations, but also what accessibility looks like, and came back, I think, rather surprised at the scope of it. We are ramped. We have the rudimentary things in place that one might expect in any organization of our nature, but there's a series of other layers that are going to need to be addressed in order for us to meet the new standards of accessibility. Signage that you can still read if you're partially vision impaired, if you're colorblind. There'll be lights, there'll be sounds, there'll be all kinds of things that most of us just don't think about in regard to lesser known visible limitations or disabilities and invisible disabilities. And so the next 5 years will be very interesting in regard to what we end up having to do to make our buildings and our practice more effective. I mean, this would even include our website and how it's laid out, the color choices we use, the fonts and everything else. It's all going to be impacted.
Thank you. You okay with that, Trustee Young? Okay, so moving on, then we will start our policies that we have brought forward. So number 4 on the agenda is policy 600, personal changes to years of service. And this we have discussed last year before we left for the end of the school year. And the intention is to change the policy to 10, acknowledging staff, all staff at 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. Is there any discussion on how people feel about that? Or, yeah, Trustee Young? Oh, you're muted, Trustee Young.
I am unmuted. It's because my partner's eating lunch in the living room. Yeah, the corn chips make a sound. Anyway, yeah, I'm just really glad that this has come forward, because in all those years, and I don't know, Trustee Flynn, how many year longer than I am, but I've always wanted to do more recognition of our employees, both our MATA staff, our QP staff, our P&VP, our senior management. And I'm just really glad that there is this change to the policy coming forward. I'd like to do more, but I know that we have some constrictions around budget too. So it's a good compromise. Thank you.
Dr. Jory.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, and this is a very simple change, and it just recognizes that there's a scope of service that they all deserve to be recognized. 10 years is a significant stretch of time for somebody in a workforce, and we felt that's a nice, simple marker to put in there. And whatever the board decides to put against this, and it may just be certificates, it may be something more than that. But I think the gesture is worth following through on, and noting that 20 years isn't really the scope of it. 10, 20, and 30 will get us a little bit closer to recognizing people as they spend their time with us, doing great work on behalf of our kids.
Thank you. Trustee Kurland.
Yeah, thanks. Well, being one of those people that was on the receiving end of the recognition, it didn't really matter that much to me. just being with the kids and remembering the kids was enough for a lot of people. But what I'd like to ask is, that's just my personal observation, but what I'd like to ask is, what do we, maybe it's not the appropriate time, but what are we thinking of doing for these people? Like at 10 years, do you get a certificate? In 20 years, you get a cup and an umbrella. You know what I mean? There's some sort of recognition that we want to do.
Thanks, Barry. Trustee Flynn. You're muted.
Getting back into this is tough. Yeah, the Long Service Committee has discussed this a couple of times over, and as Peter has said, it sort of fluctuates between the certificate to a pin to, and I know Elaine doesn't like an apple, but it is, and sort of counter to Barry, your comment that it's working with the kids that has the meaning for you. I did meet a staff person this summer who said their fellow employee with them in the room was so upset that she'd made 30 years with this district and nothing happened. Yeah. So I know we have a number of employees at 30 year, and so we'll have to catch up with those that are beyond 30. I don't think that's going to be a big deal, but if anyone has any ideas, please help out the Long Service Retirement Committee. Our next meeting is October the 12th. Because we have bantered around from pins to certificates to apples to pins, not pens. And then Peter's notion of from previous work has been luncheons at each of the schools, where amongst their peers, the 10, 20, and 30 are recognized once. And if we do our thinking, I think well enough ahead, we'll have enough, maybe go bid into the budget this year. It's a $10,000 budget for the two. And then knowing if we need to have an ask for some more, we can line it up for budget discussions in February, March, April. So that's like, if anyone has ideas of what they would have liked to receive at 10, 20, or 30, chime in.
Thank you, Trustee Flynn. Madam President, Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. I just want to say that I think recognition is important. It by all means doesn't serve as the be all and end all, but it's nice to see that 10, 20, and 30 years, those are all significant factors. I was part of a district way back in the roaring 90s that provided dinner every year for the whole, all their employees, but those are back in the good old days. So recognition goes a long way, and oftentimes recognition is just recognition of thanks, you're doing a great job. And so I look forward to the meetings with Trustee Flynn and that long service crew, because I think it's important. I think it's important as a small part of retention, which is going to be, I think, an issue potentially moving forward. So I appreciate this, and that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, so
so that'll go forward to first reading.
Yes.
Okay. Are everybody on side for that?
Yes.
I don't want to assume as to tell my long service people that it's going forward. Thank you. Great.
Okay, moving on. Number 5 on the agenda, bylaw 1, Board of Education consideration will be given to the provincial guidelines for trustee code of conduct. We went through that. We've added some of the information in, and I'm going to let Dr. Jory speak on that.
Thank you. So the bylaw is more or less intact as it was before until you get to, let's see here, about 8 pages in.
Yeah.
Page 6 of 9 in your package, if you have that open on your screen, and you see that as per at the top of the page, trustee code of ethics has been changed to conduct. We have an update to the board policy that it refers to. We had the old one in there before it needed to be corrected. And then there's a live link in there. And then a little bit of just grammar in there, specifying where the information can be found to go farther in the trustee handbook, and a live link to that. We like our live links here. All right, so those two changes, those two edits, 3 edits actually, are on page 6 of 9. And then if you scroll down to the last page of the bylaw, I've done some wordsmithing here just to compress a few items into one statement that kind of captures it. But more importantly, I've gone to the BCSTA handbook, taken their recommended language, and essentially just slid it into that spot as smoothly as I could. And so that updates us a little bit. This was it came out of discussion in well, a number of times, but also in our summer retreat conversations around, we would like to mirror the BCSDA language and use it as much as possible, and be as specific as possible when it comes to responses to breaches of trustee conduct. So you can see the underlined parts in there have been ostensibly added. Items 3 and 4 were compressed a little bit and added to 2, and then I'll close by saying, and this has been the main subject of about 4 or 5 sessions across the province over the last year and a half. It's important to note that except as expressly permitted by the School Act, a board's authority does not extend so far as to effectively remove a trustee from their elective office. We had a overstep in Victoria. Of course, this is to prevent that from happening again. So I'll pause there.
Great, thank you so much. Trustee Young.
Yeah, thanks for this. When when I did the recent update, we were only partway through that Victoria thing. So this updates it nicely, and I think the bulletin was really good, and I'm glad that it's in the live links. The trustee handbook is actually a dead link, so you might want to check it, or at least it was when I checked it. We might want to check into that. I tried to take what the trustee handbook had and just pop it into the bylaw, because I think it's important that it's a bylaw. And I noted that a lot of people have it as policy, but bylaw is actually holds more weight than policy. So there you go. And finally, although we had the discussion at the retreat, I am still supportive of splitting Area G into Parksville and Qualicum, and that's probably the last I'll say about that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Trustee Austin.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, when I was looking at this, and yeah, that last section of this policy has basically been copied and pasted from the BCSTA recommendations. And on the surface, I don't really have a problem with it. However, when I was looking at the judge's opinion on that Victoria case and what they said, and I'm looking at this kind of going, well, I don't think this is going to address that, because the judge said, and I know, everybody's been looking at this and looking at it closely, so I'm sure that I'm missing something here, or missing a nuance, because I'm sure, this has been looked at pretty closely. I think the judge said, says in a ruling, the School Act does not authorize the board to sanction them, adding the board does not have the power to suspend a trustee in a manner that amounts to a de facto removal of a trustee from their elected office. And so when I look at this policy, and it says being subject to a motion of censure passed by the majority, or being removed from one, some, or all board committees, effectively that's that de facto piece of you're removing a trustee from their duties. And I'm just, to me, that this is in conflict with what the judge's ruling was, but I don't know, other people might have other insight into that, because I think what this is saying is exactly what the judge said Victoria overstepped on.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or information that would help Trustee Austin? Trustee Flynn, you're muted again.
I should just leave it open because I just start talking.
Yes, you should.
I was on the working group. I was representing the board of directors of the BC Public School Employers Association. And this has really been the lead from the Ministry of Education and Childcare and the governance and legislative branch. So yes, I kind of agree, Julie, with your reading of the judge's documents. And then I've also read the Victoria documents, and Beverly McLaughlin also basically said there's no teeth in the School Act that tells you can do anything. It was kind of her short form of, but this I would suggest has been vetted and put through a pretty tight screen with the working group that did the work over the past year on this to land, as close as we can get with the tools that we have. And the balance of that use is trying to give, I think, boards some leeway to have flexibility, but also to have kind of only baby teeth in it. I mean, there is nothing that we can do, but it's also standing by and serving notice that, there's a standard of conduct that trustees need to uphold. So I'm not saying what your interpretation is incorrect or anything like that, but I can assure you that this has been put through a pretty fine screen through the legislative branch of the ministry and their governance and workplace staff. There was 3 of them on the committee.
It would be interesting. I suppose we don't have that. It would be interesting. I wonder what the judge who presided over that case would say about this wording. They would go, yep, that comes to the line but doesn't cross the line. Or I'd love to hear what their interpretation of this wording is.
Well, I could ask. We have a follow-up meeting coming in the fall of the working group to see how districts are doing taking this on and putting it into their, board policies or bylaws and things like that. And I could certainly ask whether or not any of the senior staff have sought the opinion of the presiding judge. Yeah.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. No, because there was a lot of other judges in other places that had looks at these things as well in different forms. Like Toronto got themselves into trouble. Toronto Board of Education. And yeah.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That was good discussion. So that will be moved also to our regular board meeting. Number 6, moving on. Number 6 on your agenda, policy potentially going to a 3rd and final reading. The first one is going to be the Sustainable Practices 100, and that's in your documents. And I believe that Dr. Jory, you were going to speak on that as well.
Yep, just a bit of a refresher. I know that after having a break from policy committee for a few months, the little details sometimes get lost. And so you can see on a little bit of bolstering there to the guiding principles mentioned in E. So instead of encouraging students to be energy use and material consumption. This is basically calling us to task and creating some measure of accountability. We're all going to have to try here. Like, you can't just watch. You've got to be a participant, and we need everybody to be on the team if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint and to some extent our costs. And I got a little bit specific here in the admin procedure, which I'm going to do. I'm bringing up I brought it up 4 or 5 months in a row at the principals meetings, just to remind people that as we move into the fall, when the HVAC systems come on, that we're going to need to be mindful of closing doors and windows because there's a significant cost to having them open. in the long ago, we were, I think, aware of this type of waste. And then during COVID, in order to ease anxiety and try to find ways to, to get people back into the workforce, get people, kids coming to school, there was a kind of an emphasis on, well, what can we do to increase ventilation, in this more organic way, and so we've essentially created some habits that we may need to undo. And I also mentioned here turning off of lights and removal of extraneous appliances. And we're going to charge the ops department alongside with the principals to be monitors of this to some extent. But as the policy says, we need everybody to be on board. Those little space heaters, extra hot plates, even fun extra lighting can be a bit of a burden to the system. We'll let the experts be the experts on this and advise us, but once again, we've got to be careful about how we use our power within reason, Matt. And I know you're watching and thinking, yeah, well, let's not be too finicky over let's say an LED light that doesn't actually use any power whatsoever. And I hear you, absolutely. We're not trying to pick a fight with this. We're just trying to keep our costs under control, keep our footprint as tight as it should be, because that's our obligation.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Trustee Austin.
Thanks. I'm not going to hold this up, but perhaps, I'm thinking maybe the next time around, I find this was a failing on my part. I should have spoken up sooner, but this is very, very heavy toward the energy management, which is incredibly important. Yes. But there is so much more to sustainable practices than simply energy management, and I feel like it's been given the other things: composting, recycling, trees on our properties, treed areas, things like that, water saving measures, water retention. There's just so much to sustainable practices that I feel like we're kind of missing in here. So it's alluded to once in a while when it sort of says sustainable stewardship or things like that, but I feel like we're missing a chunk here because it's just so weighted to the energy management side. I don't think I'll make a big thing about it now, but I'm certainly going to be putting some thought into it, and maybe next time it comes around to us, we can look at it a little closer.
Thank you. And we can look at that because it is important. It's all important. Are there any other questions? Yes, Trustee Kurland, you're muted.
I'm unmuting. Yeah, I appreciate what Julie's saying, but we have to start somewhere. And that when I, found out that our largest amount of CO2 output was the building themselves, 1,700 tons of CO2 a year. So we start with that, and energy management is extremely important. Then we can move into some of the other points, but we have to start somewhere. With this as a board, in the classrooms it's different, but what teachers are doing. But I think it's critical that we get some kind of handle on what we're doing with the CO2s.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Kurland. Are there any other questions? Seeing no further, I'm going to carry on with the agenda. We have one last policy that we're looking at. It's going to a final reading as well, and it's 301, the living wage. And it's a really small addition. It's the changing of one word, I think, isn't it, Dr. Jory?
Can I just jump in here?
It's the changing. Sorry.
Was Sherry allowed? Go ahead. Was Sherry brought into this meeting? There was a message from Matt that said Sherry's been waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah, she seems to be in the lobby.
And I've been getting pop-up.
I'll see if I can bring her in.
It doesn't show that she's waiting for me.
There she is.
Here now.
Sorry, Sherry, if you've been waiting all that time. I didn't see you on my list to let in. So moving forward, living
Okay.
wage, 301.
Right, we had a rousing conversation last day, and essentially it was about the difference between insure and encourage. And if you recall, I'd wanted to replace insure with encourage so that we could, live with this. And through conversation, we'd agree to go back to insure, and so that's what you see there in the line. So it'd gone over, and then now it's back as it was before. And the rationale for keeping it comes from the administrative procedures, if you recall. Had some conversations with the living wage people and taken a line out of their own policy for living wage, which was that we weren't going to, it does not capture or mean to capture any workers that we have as a subcontractor or a vendor until they exceed 120 hours of labor or 0.5% of the school district purchasing budget. So that's their language. We've plopped it in there. And then that allowed me to say, okay, given that caveat, we could move forward as it is. One thing we did do, though, is we kept item 7 about enforcement off that, because in my recollection, or Mr. Amos's recollection, that hadn't actually happened, and we didn't see if couldn't think of a way that we actually could effectively do that. So that's the way that it stands now. And essentially, that means no change to the original board policy, but the
Oh, your mic's gone out again, Dr. Jory.
or authority over this type of decision making.
Thank you. Trustee Austin.
I just want to say I thank you to all. I really appreciate the conversation and discussion we've had around this policy, and thank you very much, Peter, for following up with the living wage folks. That has assured me if they're comfortable with our policy, then I feel much more comfortable going forward with how things are. And so that's it. Thank you very much, folks, for the conversation and for trying to accommodate those things.
Thank you. Dr. Jory.
Oh, and just to let you know, we did sign up again. We paid the $400 and filled out the form, and so we are, as a school district, again a part of the living wage community. You should see us on their website once they update. So once again, we're back on.
Great. Thank you so much. Is there any? Trustee Flynn.
$400 seems a bit steep. What do we get for $400?
Bragging rights.
Bragging rights. Okay, I won't comment on that.
Leadership rights.
Peter, yeah, you're cut out again, Peter. Okay, yep, no. Let's put this one to bed. Yep.
Okay. So are there any further questions? Trustee Flynn, your hand is still up. Do you have something more you want to add?
No, it just doesn't go down when I put lower down, and then all of a sudden it disappears when it wants.
All right.
Goes away.
Okay. All right. Future topics. Are there any future topics? I have nothing on my agenda. If there's anything that anybody would like to add. So our next meeting. Oh, Dr. Jory. Dr. Jory.
Go ahead, Trustee. Go ahead, Trustee Austin. I think you were first.
Oh, I guess I was just going to ask, where are we moving forward now? Are we going back and sort of just starting to revisit all these policies and bylaws again, going through the book, or what is our process now moving forward?
Well, we just touched on that slightly, and Dr. Jory, do you want to address this?
Yeah. Well, at some point, I think there's a collective interest in doing that. It certainly comes up often enough, and we're, I guess, waiting for, something that is more of a consensus around us actually digging in and starting from the beginning again. Trustee Kellogg and I were comfortable to cherry pick. Things come up, ministry sends us stuff, things come from the field, and there'll be a new thing every month, probably, if not two, that'll come out of that path. I think there is a bit of a reluctance just to re-engage in the process for the purpose of re-engaging in the process. I think, if I may speak on behalf of the two of us, and certainly Trustee Kellogg, if I'm not getting it right, please add on or say whatever you want to say, but I don't want the work to be performative. It has to address a need. It has to address a set of interests. Otherwise, we're taking the committee through a process of discussion that doesn't necessarily or won't necessarily lead to changes. You're essentially the same board as did this the last time, I guess is where I'm coming from. And until there's a change in personnel and a change in interests, to me, it seems like it would be a fairly low yield endeavor to go back and start again, at least right away. So comments and questions on that, and certainly Trustee Kellogg, round out my thoughts if I didn't get it.
Did you have another comment? Okay, Trustee Austin?
Yeah, because this is why I could never chair the policy committee, because I can't keep straight what policies have come through and when and by whom, and because it's always been my understanding that, yeah, a board of trustees wants to ensure that they get through their policy book at least once during their term, get through the whole thing and revisit them all. But it's true, when Elaine and Peter were doing it, we managed to get through like all of them pretty much. And then Carol and Peter have been doing great, picking up ones that have been coming forward and ones that need attention. So I agree with what Peter is saying, absolutely. I suppose my only question is it worth maybe even not during like having policy committee, but maybe assigning, a little chunk of policies to certain trustees, saying, here, can you look at these ones, and just to review and edit, make sure that the live links are working, make sure our gender pronouns are being effectively and properly used, and things like that. Just sort of having another set of eyes to do that kind of review, and it doesn't necessarily have to go through committee at this point.
Trustee Young.
And nobody's going to be surprised by what I say. I actually think that good governance practice is to look at your policies regularly and sequentially. I think over the 4 years that I did the policy committee, I've had a fair amount of experience writing policy, and that's why I took it on. It was actually a 6-year commitment. But I recognize that other people will see things in a different way. I mean, every one of these policies and bylaws has my fingerprint on it in a way. And some of them more than others. And, Dr. Jory can certainly tell you that my fingerprints are not his fingerprints, and they're not anybody else's fingerprints, So I think it's worth actually sequentially looking at it again. My hunch is that there will be some changes in language. There's always movement in the ministry. There's always new bulletins. For example, halfway through this process, I started infusing the rationales with bulletins and regulations that had come out, because I recognized that was part of the rationale for doing the policies. So I think there are things that we could look at. Do we need to look at the way that I was doing it, like 9 policies each meeting? Well, that'd get us through the book, but it may be that it could go faster and it may be that it could go slower, but I do think that we need to start painting that bridge over again and get somebody else's fingerprints on it.
I'm just trying to put my hand up, but I don't need to. Thank you, Trustee Young. I just want to say that, you know, the way I run the policy committee is going to be completely different from how you ran it, and that I need to do things in chunks that I understand going forward. If it takes me 3 years, the rest of the 3 years to get through the policy book, because I'm not bringing policies forward, does not mean that I'm not looking at the book and understanding the policies as they're going forward. So I think that because I am running the policy committee, it is best that if people want me to go from one to whatever, and the odd time I put whatever's coming through that the Ministry of Education has said that we need to look at, then that's fine. That's exactly what I will do. But I don't want somebody dictating that, you know, I need to have so many policies at the policy meeting. I want to be able to run it the way that I feel comfortable with. And if it's not, then I think the school district will tell me you're not doing a good enough job and move forward
With
with
respect,
that.
that's not what I'm saying at all. You run the policy meeting differently from me, and I'm cool with that. It's just my opinion that we should be constantly reviewing policy. That's all.
And that's what we're doing. Currently, that is exactly what we're doing. So thanks, Elaine. Trustee Kurland.
Thank you. So through the chair to Julie, so you were in a sense proposing like subcommittees of the committee of the whole, right? I mean, just I'm questioning, right?
No, I was getting the impression that maybe Peter and Carol were suggesting we don't perhaps need as regular a policy committee meeting. Maybe, you know, maybe we can do it once every 2 months or something, or until, oh, that's not, oh, and so I thought in the interim, while if we were waiting for a actual committee meeting, the trustees could take on a little bit of work of just dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure all the policies, you know, were adhering to our
Right, but it would essentially be a subcommittee. We'd say, okay, this committee, no report. It's fine.
Well, you know how I love bureaucracy, of course. So no, I may have misunderstood that. So.
Yeah, so that was never my intent, that we would not continue to have our policy meetings as they currently are held. Yeah, Dr. Jory.
Yeah, I don't think we were thinking of going to every other month. Essentially, it's nice to have continuity in your thoughts. And if we have a discussion in September, if we don't have it in October, basically November ends up being a complete review rather than a quick review. And it's hard to kind of keep things in motion. And also, if you have and we will have policies that come forward, we need to have the discussion monthly so we can take them to the board monthly and move them along first, second, third reading. Otherwise, they'll get hung up in there for enormous periods of time. I'm not opposed to doing an overhaul, but I just, you know, feels like right on the heels of the last one that maybe it wouldn't have the impact that it could if it's done a little bit later and more fulsomely at that time. But that's a conversation that we just should continue to have, I think, and we'll get there when we get there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, Trustee Austin.
I am comfortable with you and Peter are sort of running the show on this one for this year. I'm comfortable with whatever direction you want to take, but what you want to do with it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, our next policy meeting is going to be October 16th. That looks like the wrong date. October 16th. Via video conferencing.
It actually is the right date. The Finance and Operations Committee was wrong. I looked at that this morning and went, oh, oops. So yeah, they're both on the 16th.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks so much. And if there's no further questions or comments, I'm going to call the meeting and thank you everybody for attending. And I'll see some of you at Health and Safety this afternoon.
Have fun.
Take care.
Thanks, Carol.
Bye.
Bye, Kevin.